that he just wants to see how the other knights train. When they arrive, the trainee knights notice their presence. One of them recognizes Aaron as the young master's maid, but they don't recognize Urian at first, instead wondering about the identity of this handsome young man. Then one of them remembers the rumors that the young master had lost a lot of weight, and they realize that this young man is Urian himself. Whispers circulate among them, expressing their disbelief at this transformation, as he was as fat as a pig just a month ago, and they wonder what kind of magic he used. Thanks to his internal energy, Urian can hear all their whispers clearly. He notices a trainee knight training seriously and proficiently, and comments that he will soon become a junior knight. Aaron tells him that these are the basic sword stances of the Rox family and advises him to watch closely. At that moment, Urian realizes that this knight is none other than Cried, one of the main characters in his novel and a future ally of the protagonist. Urian hadn't written anything about Cried's appearance before he met the protagonist and finds it interesting that he was here all along. He sees his presence as an opportunity that could be useful to him later. Urian turns back to the knights who were whispering about him, and uses Creator's Eye to see that their affinity levels range from hostile to disgusted and murderous intent. Urian decides that these knights will be his first testing ground. As Urian watches the knights, he decides to start by testing the lingering poison, a poison that spreads throughout all organs once inhaled. Urian chose one of the knights to be the first to test the skill on. He activates the lingering poison. Suddenly, one of the knights falls to his knees in pain, and his colleagues gather around him in concern, leading others to suggest calling a priest. The knight screams from the intense pain, but suddenly the knight stands up, as the pain has completely disappeared, which angers his colleagues who accuse him of wasting their time. After the success of his first experiment, Urian decides to test another poison. This time he chooses soul-killing smoke, a poison that creates illusions causing fear and confusion within a specific range. He activates it while the knights are still arguing. One of the knights was surprised when he saw a monster suddenly appear and pounce on him. The knights begin to scream in terror. Aaron was surprised by the knights' reaction and didn't understand why they were screaming. The knights collapse to the ground in a state of panic, while Aaron stands bewildered, wondering why they are acting so strangely. Each of them sees monsters, demons, and skeletons. The knights were plunged into a state of absolute terror, unable to think or act. After the knights calm down and come to their senses, they look at each other in confusion, wondering what just happened. Urian realizes that continuing the test could lead to real bloodshed, and feels satisfied with the power of his poisons. Urian told Aaron that they should go back. He tells Aaron that the place has become too noisy and he'd rather go to the 4th training hall. On their way back, a maid calls out to them and tells him he has a visitor. The maid informs him that Lady Elia Marquis has come to see him. Meanwhile, Elia is waiting for him inside, determined to break off their engagement for good this time. When Urian enters the room, Elia sees him and is utterly shocked by his new appearance, while he greets her calmly. But Elia had not yet recognized him. When the maid informs him of Lady Elia's arrival, Urian thinks of his fiancée, Elia Marquis, who is skilled with her fists. He remembers that around this time in the original story, Elia began to demand the annulment of their engagement, but the original Urian kept refusing. Urian sighs, as he had no choice but to face her. When he meets her, Elia is so shocked by his new appearance that she doesn't recognize him and asks who he is. Urian calmly tells her that it's him, which confuses her even more. She tells him she heard a rumor that he lost weight from training but thought it was false. She wonders how he could change so much in less than 2 months. Urian simply replies that he worked hard, and Elia is surprised by his answer. He explains that after being beaten by her, he thought a lot, and decided to change. Elia doubts his intentions, thinking he might be trying to pick a fight as a form of revenge, which Urian vehemently denies. Then, surprisingly, he kneels before her, expressing his gratitude. He tells her that thanks to her, he was able to come to his senses, and he sincerely apologizes for what happened back then. He adds that if she wishes to break off the engagement because of that incident, he will accept her decision. Elia, completely bewildered, asks him who he really is, to which he replies, Urian Rox, the former scoundrel. Urian apologized to her profusely, and Elia was stunned by his change. Urian thinks to himself that although what happened wasn't his fault, but the fault of the original body's owner, there is one reason that makes him ask for forgiveness in this manner. Urian uses Creator's Eye and sees Elia's status window, which reveals her traits Kingdom-Toppling Beauty and Sword Queen, and her preference level for him is -16, Hatred. Urian realizes that Elia is not just an ordinary heroine. The Sword Queen trait makes her continuously grow stronger, and later in the story, she saves the fallen protagonist and defeats one of the main villains thanks to this trait. Therefore, he figures that even if they break off the engagement, it's better to mend their relationship and make her his ally. Elia orders him to stand up and asks if he is serious about what he said. Urian confirms his seriousness and swears to it, so Elia angrily demands that he swear a real oath. As Elia pressures him with her suffocating aura, Urian thinks that this scene seems familiar. Elia threatened him that his life from now on would not be the same, and if he broke his oath, she would not hesitate to eliminate him herself. He remembers that this is the same dialogue Elia said to the original novel's protagonist, not to Urian. Under the intense pressure, Urian decides to use his internal technique, 10,000 divine poisons energy, to easily resist Elia's aura. Elia is greatly surprised when she feels her aura has been repelled, and wonders how that could happen. Urian finds the opportunity perfect to swear that he will not go back to his old ways. After she calms down, Elia shyly tells him that she will be watching him, and warns him that if he makes another mistake, the engagement will be broken off unconditionally. Then she leaves. Urian was surprised when he realized Elia didn't intend to break off the engagement. After she leaves, she meets the Marquis, who asks her if she has made her decision about the engagement. She tells him she has decided not to break it off. The Marquis was surprised by the response. When the Marquis asks her for the reason, Elia admits she doesn't fully understand it herself. She explains that she heard a rumor about his change and wanted to see for herself, wondering if he had returned to the kind and weak personality he had in his childhood. But she found him to be a completely different person, which is why she decided to trust him this time. The Marquis asked if she was sure of what she was saying, and she replied in the affirmative. She adds that if he goes back to being a scoundrel again, she will beat him to death with her own hands. The Marquis laughs happily, admiring her strong personality, and asks her to take good care of Urian. Elia refuses the Marquis's offer to stay for a few days, explaining that she told her father she was coming to break off the engagement, so the situation would be awkward. The Marquis asks her to see Urian before she leaves, but she refuses again, saying he is training and she doesn't want to disturb him. Later, the Marquis summons Urian. He initially jokes with him, pretending not to know him. Urian grew anxious, fearing his father had discovered the truth. Then he laughs and tells him he is proud of the great effort he has put in. The Marquis asks him if he knows why he was summoned, and Urian replies that he believes it's time to begin his training as a knight. The Marquis is surprised by his son's intelligence, and tells him it's time to learn the swordsmanship arts of the Rox family. But Urian tells him he has something else he'd like to discuss. The Marquis is shocked when Urian tells him he wants to learn throwing arts instead of swordsmanship. Urian firmly confirmed his decision. The Marquis strongly refuses, describing throwing arts as a cheap trick used by thieves. He adds that a primitive skill like dagger throwing couldn't even penetrate a knight's armor, let alone the scales of a low-level monster like a burak. At that point, Urian proposes a bet, whether or not he can hunt a burak using a dagger. The Marquis calls his son's stubbornness useless, asserting that a warrior's blade needs an aura to destroy a burak's scales, and that even if he trained in throwing arts for 100 years, he would never be able to penetrate them. Urian insists on the bet, pointing out that the Marquis would surely win in that case, so he should accept the bet. The Marquis finally agrees, seeing it as an opportunity to break his son's stubbornness. They agree on the terms of the bet. If Urian succeeds in hunting the burak, he will train him himself from now on, but if he fails, he will follow the Marquis's will. Urian is delighted and decides to prepare for the practical test the next day. Urian wondered to himself how many attempts he would need to penetrate the burak's scales. He plans to eat some hidden poisonous herbs that night to raise the level of his 10,000 divine poisons energy to the 3rd star. Aaron later comes to him with a message from the Marquis, setting the time for the test at 12 o'clock noon in the first training hall. Urian asks her if she knows the details of the bet, and she tells him the entire palace knows, and that everyone is laughing, and talking about how Urian will wet his pants in fear or run away upon seeing the burak. She tells him he is still the public enemy in everyone's eyes. He asks her if these people will come to watch, and she confirms that the hall will be packed because the Marquis did not forbid attendance. Urian got flustered, muttering to himself that what he was seeing had already turned into a spectacular scene. Urian asks for her opinion, and she replies that she believes tomorrow will be his day. That night, Urian reaches the 3rd star in his technique. On the day of the bet, the training hall was packed with crowds. The Marquis asks Urian if he is ready. Urian notices the large number of attendees, and the Marquis claims he only told his personal mage, and that the news somehow spread. He warns him not to embarrass himself in front of everyone. After that, an elder begins the summoning ritual. Urian watches, fascinated, as this is the first time he has seen magic in person. Suddenly, a huge monster tore through the place, kicking up a thick cloud of dust interspersed with an aura saturated with electrical charges. What is even more surprising to him is that he will see the monster he himself created as an author with his own eyes. The burak monster appears, an oceanic monster standing 150 centimeters tall. The crowd panics at its grotesque appearance, but Urian looks at it with curiosity. He remembers creating this monster in a hurry while eating sashimi at a restaurant when he was short on ideas. He even thinks that if it weren't for its arms and legs, it might have looked a little cute. Suddenly, the burak attacks, and the crowd screams, but the Marquis prevents the knights from intervening. Urian grumbled that the monster had ambushed him without any prior warning. Urian notices that the monster isn't very fast, and decides to test the hardness of its scales first. When he focuses, a new crosshair appears before him, indicating the monster's weak point. He decides to try aiming for it. He throws his dagger with extreme precision towards the weak point. The monster was hit by the dagger and jumped from the intensity of the pain. The monster dies instantly. Urian is surprised that he finished it off with just one hit. A stunned silence falls over the hall. Then the crowd erupts in cheers, declaring that the young master has successfully hunted the Burak and that what he did was absolutely amazing. Urian stands victorious as everyone calls out his name. In a state of disbelief, the Marquis asks Urian how he did that. Urian simply replies that he aimed well and hit the target. The Marquis refuses to accept the result, considering it illogical for a Burak to die from a single dagger. Urian takes advantage of the crowd's presence and hints loudly that the great Marquis would surely not go back on his word. The Knight Commander tries to save the situation, pointing out that Urian's dagger landed precisely under the Burak's arm where there were no scales, and that what happened was just luck. The Marquis insists on redoing the bet, but Urian refuses. The Marquis then offers to add a new promise to the bet. If Urian wins again, he will grant him one wish, whatever it may be. But if Urian loses, he must learn swordsmanship as originally planned. The Marquis adds that the opponent this time will not be a Burak, but a knight. He asks Urian if he will accept the bet, and Urian agrees. Urian sees this as an opportunity, especially when he notices that Knight Commander Karox is in the audience, and thinks it might be a chance to break Karox's pride. But he backs down from this idea, realizing it might be better to leave him be for now to ensure he continues to receive his supply of poisons through Sparrow. Urian tells the Marquis that he understands facing an official knight would be too difficult for him, and suggests instead that he face a trainee knight to make the duel fair. Urian is surprised when he realizes it has come to the point of him facing a trainee knight. He then asks the Marquis to allow him to choose the knight himself. When the Marquis asks for his choice, Urian announces that he will choose Cried. Cried is summoned, and he steps forward respectfully. The Marquis gives him a mission. Cried, with all courage, accepts any mission the Marquis gives him. The Marquis told him the mission is to face that boy and fix his bad habits. Cried is shocked by this order. The Marquis noticed Cried's concern and asked if he could complete the mission, but he agrees to carry it out after the Marquis insists. Urian reassures Cried and tells him not to worry too much. As Urian and Cried prepare for the duel, Urian announces that he will only throw 3 daggers, and if Cried can block all of them, he will consider himself the loser. This announcement angers the Marquis, who sees it as arrogance and urges Cried to teach him a lesson. The audience shares the Marquis's excitement, cheering for Cried and threatening him with no food or punishment if he loses. Amidst the uproar, Urian hears a woman's voice wishing him good luck, which pleases him. When the duel begins, Urian prepares to throw the first dagger. He uses Creator's Eye to examine his opponent but is surprised to see numerous targeting marks on Cried's body, unlike the Burak monster which only had one. He realizes that targeting any of these points would result in killing Cried, which he does not want. Therefore, he decides to aim directly at Cried's sword. Urian throws the first dagger with immense force, and when it collides with Cried's sword, Cried is pushed back several steps, and a booming sound like a cannon is heard. The Marquis is shocked and remained standing in his place, stunned by the tremendous power that came from an ordinary dagger. Cried trembled from the shock of the dagger that hit his sword, even making a crack in it. Urian tells Cried that this strike was just a warning not to be complacent in his defense. He then prepares for the second throw, announcing that this time he will throw with his full power. Urian is confident that Cried, as a main character, will not die from this blow. Urian uses the straight strike skill and throws the second dagger. Cried realized the dagger's power was immense, and despite his attempt to block it, Cried's sword breaks on impact. Amidst the astonishment of the spectators and the Marquis, he is thrown to the ground on his knees, ending the duel by dropping his sword amidst the Marquis's bewilderment. After Cried's defeat, the Marquis asks to speak with Urian in private, but Cried intervenes, objecting that the bet is not over yet, and there is still one dagger left. The Marquis tries to end the duel, but Urian decides to ask Cried directly. Urian asks Cried to raise his head, and asks if he will accept this inconclusive result. Cried found no way to respond, as he felt unable to face Urian, reminding him that what makes a knight is reaching a final result, whether victory or defeat, by asking him if he would give up like this. Cried regains his resolve and asks for a new sword, declaring that he will not withdraw in this manner. Suddenly, Cried awakens his aura, to the astonishment of those present. Urian realizes this is perfectly in line with the story he wrote, where Cried's berserker trait manifests when he reaches his absolute limit. Urian sees this as an opportunity to test his advanced techniques. As Cried prepares with his blazing aura, which is equivalent to the talent of a seasoned knight, the Marquis felt worried about Urian, unsure of how he would act, while Urian appeared completely confident in himself. He asks Urian to throw the final dagger. Urian, in turn, prepares and throws the dagger using the curved mountain technique, a technique that makes the dagger spin in an unpredictable path. Cried and the Marquis are surprised by this technique. Cried felt angry because he thought Urian was joking with him. Cried swung his sword with all his might towards the dagger, but the dagger changed direction in the air and avoided his sword strike. Cried was surprised that the dagger had embedded itself in his shoulder, causing him intense pain, for which he kept screaming. The audience is confused, believing the throw was slow and that Cried is overreacting. Urian thinks that the pain Cried is feeling must be immense because he used a larger amount of internal energy in this throw. Before the duel can continue, the Marquis intervenes, telling Urian that he has won the bet, and that their talk will happen later. After the duel, Urian approaches Cried, who is still in pain, and places his hand on him, using the internal energy absorption technique to relieve his pain. The pain suddenly disappears, and Cried thanks Urian warmly, and apologizes to him. Cried admits that when he first saw the dagger flying slowly, he thought Urian was mocking him, but he now realizes it was a masterfully divine technique. Cried concludes that it's impossible to learn such a technique in a short time, and therefore Urian had been hiding his skills all this time. Cried continues to develop his theory, wondering if there is a secret organization targeting the Marquis's family, and that Urian had been hiding his power until now as part of a great sacrifice to protect the family. Urian is amazed by Cried's wild imagination and realizes his personality leans towards loving conspiracy theories. Cried offers his services to Urian, pledging to help him fight any secret organizations in the future. At that moment, Urian notices that Cried's affinity level has risen to 26, favorable. Urian didn't try to correct Cried's words, simply bidding him farewell by saying he'd see him later. After Cried leaves, shouting that he will spread the truth that the young master was never a scoundrel, Urian decides it's a good idea to get close to Cried, who will later become an extremely powerful knight. Aaron praised his performance, encouraging Urian that he did well in the battle. Aaron asks Urian about the technique he used at the end of the duel. Urian tells her it's a new technique and asks for her opinion on it. Aaron replies that she ran a virtual duel in her head, and if she had faced this technique for the first time without seeing it, she would have been defeated. But now she is capable of blocking it. Urian realizes this is thanks to the rare and powerful clear mind trait she possesses. Urian reminds her that she received knightly education since she was young, and if she hadn't become his personal maid, she would be a knight now. He asks her if she is satisfied with her current situation, and she is surprised by his question. Later, in the Marquis's office, the Marquis summons Urian to his office. He initially scolds him for calling him my lord instead of father when they are alone. Urian was surprised by the Marquis's attempt to approach him cordially, but he addressed him in a very normal way as he wanted. Then he seriously asks him about the technique he used in the duel, noting that he searched through books and couldn't find any throwing technique with such a masterful movement. He adds that it's impossible to learn such a skill on his own in just 1 month, no matter how much of a genius he is. When the Marquis demands to know the truth behind Urian's technique, Urian tells him that he cannot tell the whole truth, but he had prepared a story because he anticipated this situation. He tells him that he found a book. Urian explains that he was searching the family's upper library for effective training methods when he stumbled upon a book lying on the floor. This caused another book to fall from the top shelf, and this book was untitled but had strange engravings on it. Without thinking, he opened it, and a light emanated from it, and something was absorbed into his head. After that, the book disappeared. The Marquis concludes with astonishment that this book was a grimoire. Urian thinks to himself that of course he knows what a grimoire is, as he was the one who created this setting in the story, where distinguished mages engrave their techniques into books to pass them down. The Marquis is convinced by the story, commenting that the attic library contains so many books collected by his ancestors that he himself doesn't know everything in it, and that Urian finding this book was a great stroke of luck. Urian agrees, saying that he indeed hit the jackpot. The Marquis tells Urian that he will honor his promise and will not force him to learn swordsmanship again, and based on the additional promise, he asks Urian to tell him his wish. Urian replies that he wants the position of heir. The Marquis is shocked by this request, so Urian asks him sarcastically if he won't grant him his wish. The Marquis replies hesitantly that he will have to grant it because it is within his authority. Urian notices his father's discomfort, and tells him that him taking the position of heir will trouble him, as many will oppose it and Lady Kana will cause a huge fuss. Therefore, he declares that he will give up this wish this time. The Marquis feels relieved and thanks him warmly. Urian thinks about the truth, which is that he doesn't care about the position of heir at all, because that would mean spending his days tied down, learning to manage the Marquisate's affairs, a life without freedom. Urian thinks that instead of becoming the heir, he would rather use his time to master the arts of the Tang clan of Sichuan and travel the world in search of opportunities. The Marquis asks him to tell him another wish. Urian tells his father that he plans to create his own knightly order, and wishes to appoint Arin and Kryde as his knights. The Marquis sees this request as easier than the position of heir, and agrees, admitting that Arin's talent is too great for her to remain just a personal maid. Urian thanks his father. When the Marquis asks who will become Urian's new personal servant, as there are currently no available servants, Urian suggests a person named Sparrow.